Hello, I'm the Reverend Ortiz, and this is the study, Abraham's Pre-Law Tithe. In an attempt to make tithing a part of the Christian faith, money lovers argue that Abraham's tithe predates the law of Moses, and because of this, they assume that tithing is not a part of the law, and somehow or other, they interpret this to mean that Christians must tithe their income. Of course, just because Abraham's tithe predates the law doesn't automatically make tithing a part of the Christian faith. Nor does it mean that God's tithe is not a part of His law. But okay, it is a fact that Abraham's tithe predates the law. That much is true. However, I invite you to look at other facts that have been conveniently overlooked by money-loving ministers. Fact: no law means there was no obligation to tithe. Therefore, Abraham's tithe was an act of free will. In accordance with this fact, Christians are not obligated to tithe, and if perchance they do, it's a matter of free will, not obligation. Fact: Abraham's tithe was a gift. See Genesis 14:20. Abraham gave him a tenth. Melchizedek did not ask for a tithe, nor did God tell Abraham to give Melchizedek a tithe. No one asked Abraham to tithe. Therefore, we should be asking ourselves, why are Christians being asked to tithe? Fact: Abraham did many things before the law existed. That doesn't mean that we have to do them too. For example, Abraham's circumcision also predates the law. So, if Christians have to tithe simply because Abraham's tithe predates the law, doesn't this also imply that Christians must be circumcised, being that Abraham's circumcision also predates the law? And being that Abraham's circumcision was commanded by God, wouldn't it be logical that we should promote Abraham's mandatory circumcision before we promote his free will tithe? Fact: Abraham tithed the spoils of war, not his income. Read it in Hebrews 7:4. Therefore, if Christians are going to imitate Abraham's tithe, they're going to have to first go to war. Second, make sure they win the war, because otherwise they're dead. And third, tithe the spoils of war. I personally recommend that we do not imitate Abraham's tithe, because God has called us to live in peace. Therefore, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, not war. Fact: Abraham was a wealthy man. Read it in Genesis 13:2. Yet he never tithed from his riches. His only tithe was the spoils of war. Therefore, it is an act of deception to tell Christians they must tithe their income, knowing all too well that Abraham's tithe had absolutely nothing to do with his income. And here is the most important fact that I want to share with you today. Fact: Abraham's tithe was the result of a once-in-a-lifetime, never-to-be-repeated circumstance. Therefore, in accordance with the biblical evidence, Abraham tithed only once in his entire life. And yet pastors keep asking God's children to pay them an income tithe, not once or twice, but over and over again, week after week, month after month, year after year, throughout their entire lives. Well, the truth is, Abraham tithed only once in his life. And I challenge anyone out there that doesn't believe this to prove me wrong by posting a comment with the Bible verse where they find that Abraham tithed in another occasion. Now, some of you may be thinking, hey, but Abraham is the father of faith, and we are his children by faith. Therefore, shouldn't we tithe by faith? The answer to this question is no, because faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And since Abraham already had the victory, his tithe was a matter of fact, not faith. Therefore, Abraham did not use faith to tithe. Likewise, the Israelites never tithed by faith. The promised land was already theirs. They could see it. They could touch it. They lived in it. That was a fact. Every year, they waited for the harvest to come first, and then they tithed. If the harvest was small, their tithe was small. If the harvest was large, their tithe was large. Faith was not a requirement. The requirement was land ownership. It is a shame that love for that mighty dollar has caused so many ministers to focus this story on money. In so doing, they have overlooked a vivid typology of Christ contained within this war story. I now present to you a hidden gem. Abraham as a typology of Jesus. Both Abraham and Jesus left the comfort of their home and servants. Abraham miraculously traveled hundreds of miles during ancient times. Jesus miraculously traveled from heaven to earth. Abraham did these things to go and rescue Lot after he got himself into trouble. Jesus did these things to rescue us after we got ourselves into trouble. So both Abraham and Jesus went to war to save souls, not for riches. Abraham fought against the odds, 5 kings. Jesus fought against the odds, Satan, principalities, powers, unclean spirits, demons, etc. Abraham won the war that Lot could not win. Jesus won the war that we could not win. So both Abraham and Jesus saved the people. Both Abraham and Jesus set the people free. Abraham met the priest of Salem, which is Jerusalem. Jesus met the God of Jerusalem, which is Salem. Abraham gave a spoils of war tithe to the priests. Jesus gave himself as our spoils of war tithe to God. Abraham tithed only once in his life. Jesus paid the price of salvation only once. There should be no doubt. Abraham is clearly a foreshadow of Jesus. Now some of you may be asking, hey, wait a minute. Did you just say Jesus is our tithe? Yes, I did. For the detailed study, please view my 10-minute video titled, Jesus is our tithe. But as with all of my studies, you don't have to take my word for it. I urge you to study the scriptures diligently and allow God's Spirit to tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. And if any of my studies have been a blessing to you, please help me reach others by simply sharing these short videos with those you know, so that the body of Christ may know of this resource. Together, we can remove the stumbling stones and let justice roll on like a river. Thank you for listening. Until next time, God bless you.